The boy appeared at the edge of the parking garage on a Tuesday morning in November, the kind of cold that settles into your bones before you even realize it's happened. He was standing near the revolving door of the Harrington Grand Hotel, holding a paper bag that had gone translucent with grease stains, and he was watching the entrance with the particular stillness of a child who has learned that stillness is safer than movement. Nobody paid him much attention. That was the thing about cities. People learned early to look through certain things. Conrad Harrington IV did not look through anything. He had built his career, his entire life, really, on noticing details that other people missed. The scuff on a rival's shoe that told you the deal had gone badly. The way an assistant's eyes moved when the numbers didn't add up. He noticed the boy the moment he stepped out of the black car that idled at the hotel's entrance every morning at 7:45. He noticed, and then he looked away. That was the other thing Conrad Harrington had learned. Noticing was not the same as caring. He crossed the lobby without breaking stride, nodded to the concierge who had worked there for 11 years and whose name Conrad had never once asked, and rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, where the hotel's executive suite served as his satellite office when he was in Chicago. His real office was in Boston. His real life, if he was being honest, which he rarely was, even with himself, had stopped existing somewhere around the time his daughter stopped returning his calls. That had been 3 years ago. He did not think about that in the mornings. He set his briefcase on the desk, opened his laptop, and ordered coffee through the room's tablet system because it was faster than calling the front desk, and he did not enjoy small talk before 9 o'clock. The meeting that afternoon was the reason he was in Chicago. Lorne Whitfield, who ran the second-largest private equity firm in the Midwest, had been circling one of Conrad's hotel properties for 8 months. Conrad had let him circle. He'd learned that patience in negotiation was not a virtue so much as a weapon, and he wielded it without mercy. The coffee arrived. Conrad drank it standing at the window, looking down at the street below, where the morning had begun to accumulate. Delivery trucks, dog walkers, a woman pushing a stroller, with the focused determination of someone who had somewhere to be. And there, at the corner, the boy again. He'd moved from the parking garage entrance. He was sitting on the curb now, the paper bag balanced on his knees, watching the flow of people with those same careful eyes. He couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. He was wearing a jacket 2 sizes too large, the sleeves rolled up at the wrists, and sneakers that had once been white. Conrad turned away from the window. He had a 9 o'clock call. The call ran long, as calls always did when lawyers were involved, and by the time Conrad came down for his 11 o'clock walk, a habit his cardiologist had recommended 2 years ago, after Conrad's blood pressure had reached a number that made the man actually set down his pen, the boy was still there, not on the curb now. He'd moved to the small alcove beside the hotel's side entrance, the one the staff used, sheltered from the wind. He had opened the paper bag, and Conrad could see, even from a distance, that it contained very little. A partial sandwich, maybe. Something wrapped in foil. The boy ate slowly. That was what stopped Conrad, finally. Not the cold, not the jacket, not even the shoes. It was the way the boy ate, with the deliberateness of someone making something last. Conrad stood on the sidewalk for a moment longer than he intended. Then he went back inside. He told himself he was going to get his scarf. He had left it upstairs. That was the reason he went back in. He rode the elevator to 42, retrieved the scarf from the hook near the door, and then stood in the middle of the room for approximately 45 seconds doing nothing. He picked up the phone and called room service. "I need a breakfast order," he said. "Full. Eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, fruit if you have it. Hot chocolate." He paused. "Yes, hot chocolate. Send it down to the side entrance. Staff door. No, not to a room. Just have someone bring it to the alcove beside the staff entrance. Please." There was a brief professional pause on the other end. "Of course, Mr. Harrington. 15 minutes. Conrad put the phone down. He didn't know why he'd done that. He went back to his call notes and tried to prepare for the afternoon. 15 minutes later, when he came downstairs and rounded the corner to the side entrance, the boy was holding the tray with both hands and staring at it as though it had materialized from another dimension. A young staff member was explaining apologetically that she wasn't sure where to put the stand, and the boy was nodding along without really hearing her, his eyes fixed on the hot chocolate. Conrad watched from a distance. The boy set the tray down on the stone ledge of the alcove with extraordinary care, the kind of care you give to things you are afraid to break or spill or lose. He unwrapped the silverware from the napkin and smoothed the napkin across his knees. Then he picked up the fork and paused for just a moment, eyes closed, head slightly bowed, before he began to eat. Something in Conrad's chest did a thing he couldn't name. He turned and walked back toward the main entrance. He made it about halfway. "You don't have to stay out here," he said, not entirely sure when he had turned around. "There's a cafe inside. It's warm." The boy looked up. His eyes were brown and very direct, the kind of direct you only saw in children who hadn't yet learned to perform uncertainty. He looked at Conrad the way a person looks at something they are trying to categorize. "I'm okay," the boy said. "It's 31 degrees. I know." Conrad stood there. He was not, as a rule, a man who stood around on sidewalks in the cold having conversations that weren't leading anywhere productive. He had back-to-back meetings. He had the Whitfield negotiation to finalize mentally. He had 17 unread emails from his operations team in Boston. "What's your name?" he asked. The boy considered this for a moment, as though weighing whether the information was safe to give. "Ellie," he said finally. And then, after another pause, "Ellie Vance, Conrad." Ellie looked at him steadily. "I know who you are," he said. "You own this hotel." That surprised him. "I do. Your picture's by the front door." Eli picked up a piece of toast. "You look older in person." Conrad blinked. Then, despite everything, the cold, the meetings, the 3 years of practiced emotional efficiency, he laughed. It came out rough, like something that hadn't been used in a while. "I appreciate your honesty," he said. Eli shrugged. "My grandma says honesty is the only thing you can give for free. Your grandmother sounds smart." Something shifted in the boy's face, just slightly. The directness remained, but something underneath it moved. "She is," he said. "She's sick right now." Conrad said nothing. "She needs an operation," Eli said, in the matter-of-fact way children sometimes discuss enormous things, as though the matter-of-factness is the only way to hold them. "The kind that costs a lot. My mom's been working extra shifts, but—" He stopped, ate another bite. "But—" The word hung there, complete and incompletable. Conrad looked at the boy. He thought about saying something. Something efficient, something that closed this particular conversational door cleanly. Something that a man with 17 unread emails and an afternoon negotiation reasonably says. He thought about saying, "I'm sorry to hear that," in the tone he used for condolences at business functions, the tone that expressed appropriate empathy, while making clear that the matter was now concluded. Instead, he said, "What kind of operation?" Ellie looked up. He hadn't expected that question. "Cardiac," he said. "Her heart valve. The doctors say without it." He stopped again. He was 11 years old and he was carrying a weight that had no name and no bottom. "She raised me," he said quietly. "After my dad left, my mom works nights, so it was mostly her. She taught me to read. She used to make biscuits every Sunday." He looked down at the food on the tray. "I come here because she told me the hotel kitchen donates leftovers on Tuesday mornings to the shelter on Maple. I pick it up for her because she can't walk far anymore." Conrad sat down on the stone ledge. He did not know why he sat down. His trousers were going to collect whatever a November sidewalk in Chicago collected. He sat down anyway. "How far is the shelter?" he asked. 6 blocks, and you walk it. Every Tuesday." Eli glanced at him sideways. "And sometimes Thursday. They do soup on Thursday." Conrad looked at the boy beside him, at the oversized jacket and the careful hands and the eyes that had seen too much and held it all with a steadiness that should not have been possible at 11 years old. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said. Eli looked at him for a long moment. Then he did. Her name was Ruth. She had come to Chicago from Mississippi in 1971, at age 19, with $40 in her purse and the address of a cousin she'd never met. She had worked in a laundry, then a school cafeteria, then, for 22 years, as a teacher's aide at Holbrook Elementary, where she had apparently been beloved with the kind of ferocity that only elementary school children achieve. She had raised 3 children largely on her own, buried one of them, a son, at 34. Story Eli told briefly and with his eyes on the ground. And now, at 71, with a heart valve that had been deteriorating for 2 years, and a daughter working double shifts at a packaging plant, and a grandson who walked 6 blocks every Tuesday with a paper bag to make sure she had something warm to eat, she was waiting. She was waiting because the surgery, A transcatheter aortic valve replacement, Eli said, with the careful pronunciation of someone who had memorized the phrase. Cost more than $60,000 after insurance, and they were $11,000 short, and they had been $11,000 short for 4 months. She doesn't know I come here, Eli said. She'd think it was too much trouble. Conrad was quiet for a moment. The cold had gotten into his coat. He didn't move. She sounds stubborn, he said. The most stubborn person in the world, Eli said, and there was a warmth in it that made the words almost glow. She told me once that stubbornness is just love that refuses to quit. The sentence landed somewhere in Conrad's chest and stayed there. He thought, with a sudden and unwelcome clarity, about his daughter. About the last conversation they'd had, 3 years ago, in a restaurant in Boston, when she had told him, carefully, clearly, without raising her voice, that he had spent her entire childhood in rooms like the ones he was always in, and she had stopped waiting for him to walk out of them. He had said something efficient in response, something that closed the door cleanly. She had not called since. He had told himself, for 3 years, that she was the one who had chosen distance. Sitting on a cold stone ledge in Chicago next to an 11-year-old boy eating hotel eggs, he was not as certain of that as he usually was. Ellie, he said. The boy looked at him. I'd like to meet your grandmother. He didn't tell Eli why. He wasn't entirely sure himself. He said only that he had some time that afternoon before his meeting, and that he would like to bring lunch, and that it would require Eli to take him to wherever Ruth was, which Eli could absolutely decline. Eli studied him with those direct eyes. You're not doing this to feel good about yourself? He said, not unkindly, just clearly. Conrad considered the question with more honesty than he usually brought to self-examination. I don't know, he said. Probably partly. Most things are partly. Ellie nodded slowly. That's an honest answer, he said. Your grandmother has had some effect on me already, Conrad said, and I haven't met her. Ellie almost smiled. It was a small, cautious thing, that almost smile. But it was there. Ruth Vance lived in a 3rd-floor apartment on Callaway Street, a 15-minute drive from the hotel. The building was clean but aging, the kind of aging that comes from use rather than neglect, from too many people needing it for too long. The elevator was out. Eli climbed the stairs ahead of Conrad with the efficiency of someone who had made this trip many times, and Conrad followed with 2 bags of food from the hotel kitchen, which he had arranged in the lobby with a speed that had visibly startled the head chef. He could hear the elevator of his own life, in some distant metaphorical sense, also being out of service. Ruth was in the front room when they came in, sitting in a chair near the window with a quilt over her lap and a library book open on the side table. She was small and precise-looking, with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and eyes that went immediately to Conrad with an expression that was not alarm, but was certainly assessment. Ellie Vance, she said, in a voice that was warm and required explanation. Who is this man, and why is he carrying my lunch? Conrad Harrington, Eli said. He owns the Harrington Grand. Ruth looked at Conrad. I know who Conrad Harrington is, she said. I read the Tribune. A pause. You look older in person. Conrad set the bags down on the kitchen table and said, I'm beginning to understand where your grandson gets it. Something moved across Ruth's face. It took him a moment to recognize it as delight. She did not fuss over the food or make excessive noises of gratitude. She accepted it the way people accept things they deserve, with grace and without theater. She asked him to sit, and he sat, and they talked. It was, Conrad thought later, the strangest afternoon of his adult life. Ruth asked him questions, not polite questions, not soft questions, real ones. She asked him what he was proud of, and when he listed his properties and his profit margins, she shook her head and said, That's what you own. I asked what you're proud of. She asked him whether he had people who loved him. He said he had colleagues who respected him. She looked at him with an expression that was not pity, but was adjacent to it. She asked him when he'd last eaten a meal that wasn't room service or a business dinner. He couldn't remember. She told him about the years of teaching children to tie their shoes and sound out words and feel like they mattered. She told him that the thing about children was they always knew when you were pretending, and the only way to earn their trust was to stop. She told him about Mississippi and Chicago, and the cousin who turned out to be wonderful, and the $40 and the 22 years at Holbrook Elementary. She told him matter-of-factly about her heart, about the valve, about the cost, with the same tone Eli used, the matter-of-factness of holding enormous things. Conrad listened. He did not check his phone. At 3:15 he said, "I have a meeting." Ruth nodded. "Go," she said simply. He stood up. He looked at this woman in her chair with her quilt and her library book and her stubborn love and her leaking heart. "I'll be back on Thursday," he said. Ruth looked at him. "You don't have to." "I know," he said. He left before she could say anything else. In the car back to the hotel, he called his assistant. "Lydia," he said, "I need you to find me the best cardiac surgeon in Chicago. Specifically for transcatheter aortic valve replacement, I need a name today." A pause. "Is everything all right, Mr. Harrington?" "Yes," he said. "No." He looked out the window at the city moving past. "Get me a name." The Whitfield meeting happened. Conrad sat across the table from Lorne Whitfield and his 3 lawyers and was precisely as formidable as he always was, and the deal closed at the number Conrad had decided on 6 months ago. Whitfield tried twice to push, and Conrad waited him out both times with the patience that was not a virtue but a weapon. He was good at this. He had always been good at this. In the elevator afterward, going back up to 42, he thought about what Ruth had said. "That's what you own. I asked what you're proud of." He sat at the desk for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and transferred $11,000 to the fundraising account that Eli's mother had set up 4 months ago, which had $847 in it, and which Conrad had found in approximately 9 minutes once he'd decided to look. He stared at the screen after he'd done it. He didn't feel good about himself, exactly. He felt like a man who had done one correct thing after a long time of doing many efficient things. Those were not. He was discovering at 58 years old the same. He came back on Thursday. Ruth had heard from the surgeon's office that morning. A Dr. Anisha Mehta, who turned out to be not merely excellent, but, according to 3 separate colleagues Conrad's assistant had contacted, something approaching extraordinary. Ruth knew the call had come because Conrad had made one also. She did not pretend otherwise. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. He was learning to say that. "Sit down," she said. "I made biscuits." He sat down. He ate a biscuit that was, without question, the best thing he had eaten in years. Not because it was complicated, but because it wasn't. Because it tasted like something made by someone who understood that the point of food was comfort and not performance. Eli was doing homework at the kitchen table. He had spread his papers across one half of it and left the other half for the plates with the careful spatial logic of someone accustomed to sharing small surfaces. They sat together for an hour and a half. Conrad did not check his phone. He called his daughter that night. He had been composing the version of this call that was efficient and conclusive, and that offered a reasonable explanation for the 3-year silence. He had that version ready. When she picked up, when she said, "Dad," in a voice that was careful and young and his, he scrapped the efficient version entirely. "I owe you an apology," he said. "A real one. Not the kind I've been telling myself I'd give you once I figured out the right framing. Just the real one." Silence on the line. "I was in too many rooms," he said. "You told me that. You were right. I didn't know how to come out of them. I'm not sure I know how yet, but I'm trying." More silence. And then, "Dad, just that, but differently than the first time." "Are you in Boston?" he said. "I'm in Portland now. I moved. Can I come?" "Not." He stopped. "Just to see you, just for a day, if that's all you want. I'll get it right this time." A long pause, long enough that he thought, with a grief that was absolutely deserved, that she might say no. "Christmas," she said finally. "If you're not working, I won't be working," he said before she'd even finished the sentence. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, small, cautious, like Eli's almost smile. "Okay," she said. "Christmas." He held the phone for a while after she hung up. The surgery was scheduled for the 2nd week of December. Conrad was in Boston by then, but he called. He called Eli, who had his number now for reasons that had developed naturally and without announcement. Eli reported on everything with the seriousness of a field correspondent. The surgical team, the prep, the waiting room, where his mother had sat for 4 hours with her hands in her lap. "She came through," Eli said, and Conrad could hear in those 2 words every hour of every week of every month of the boy carrying paper bags in the cold and eating slowly to make things last. "I know," Conrad said, though Lydia had already texted him. "How's she feeling?" "Tired," Eli said. "But she asked for biscuits already, so." Conrad laughed. That rough sound again, the one that was getting less rough with use. Of course she did. Mr. Harrington, Eli said. Conrad. A pause. Conrad. He said the name with the deliberateness of someone learning a new word. Why did you help us? Conrad was quiet for a moment. He thought about the efficient answer, the one about the fund and the surgery costs and the chance encounter. Your grandmother told me, he said finally, that stubbornness is love that refuses to quit. He looked out his office window at Boston in December, gray and cold and complicated in his. I've been quitting things for a long time, people, mostly. I saw you eating that sandwich on the curb and making it last, and I thought, that boy has more sense than I do. About what matters. About not wasting things. Silence. She'll say that was too kind of you, Eli said. Tell her I'm practicing. He could hear the smile in Eli's voice now. Not the almost smile, not the careful, cautious one. A real one. I will. Conrad Harrington had built an empire on the principle that everything could be optimized. Space, capital, time, human interaction. He had 47 hotels and a personal net worth that required special accounting. He had lawyers and advisors and an assistant named Lydia, who anticipated his needs with uncanny accuracy. He had been, for most of his adult life, extraordinarily efficient and nearly completely alone. What he had not built, and what no amount of optimization could construct, was the thing Ruth Vance had in a third-floor apartment on Calloway Street, with a leaking heart and a Tuesday paper bag and a grandson with careful eyes. She had built something that could not be quantified or acquired or negotiated. She had built a life that mattered to people. He understood, standing in his 42nd floor suite with the Boston skyline going cold and white outside the window, that he was not too old to try. His daughter was in Portland. He had a ticket for the 23rd. He had not worked a Christmas in 11 years. He was going to this one. On the credenza near the window, between his briefcase and his laptop bag, was a small card that Eli had sent in the mail. Actual mail, with a stamp, 3 days after the surgery. It was a piece of notebook paper folded in thirds, and in it Eli had drawn, with careful precision, a picture of two people eating at a kitchen table. One tall, one small. Biscuits on a plate between them. Underneath, in the careful handwriting of a boy who had been taught by a woman who had spent 22 years helping children understand that words were worth learning. Thank you for coming to the table. Conrad kept the card on the credenza. He looked at it every morning. It was the first thing in a long time that he kept not because it was useful but because it was true.